Next tonight on BBC One Scotland, Alistair McGowan's Big Impression.
I'm sharing a box room with a 6-year-old who thinks he's Scary Spice.
Now 30.5 years old, Adrian Albert Mole is a devoted family man.
Dad's asleep or dead.
It's your father, you go!
With a respectable job.
It's the serial killer comedy in 12 half hours.
And adorable parents.
Oh, Chew.
Actually, he cooks pig's heads for a living and is still besotted with Pandora Braithwaite. And then there's a dog.
He's got a baby!
Why are you taking my pulse?
Helen Baxendale, Zoe Wanamaker, Alison Steadman, and Stephen Mangan as Adrian Mole.
Why does my bladder always let me down at times of national importance?
The Cappuccino Years, Monday at 10:35, BBC One Scotland.
1 year on from the disappearance of Lanarkshire couple David and Edith McCallum, Strathclyde police have announced their plans to step up the investigation in an effort to finally solve the case. Chief Inspector John McConaughey hotly denied that interest in the investigation had begun to wane, claiming that his on-scene officers were as diligent, vigilant and receptive to new information as they were on day one of the inquiry.
Chew the fat again, tomorrow at 11:05, BBC One Scotland.
And the new issue of Radio Times contains features and previews on forthcoming BBC programmes, together with complete listings for all major television channels. Now on BBC One Scotland, more big impressions from Alistair McGowan.
Rivalry between the two North London football giants Tottenham Hotspur and Arsenal reached new heights today when fire destroyed part of Tottenham's White Hart Lane ground. Police suspect arson.
This is something you'll never forget.
Out of this world.
All the people on this earth are truly one.
Out of their heads.
It stopped me smoking.
Golden Grooves, goals galore.
I don't know why somebody hasn't thought of it before.
Join Jonathan Watson.
3-year-old Johnny. He's having fun.
Aye, that'll be right.
And revisit 1969.
Why?
Well, it passes the time.
The Golden Years returns tomorrow at 10:35, BBC One Scotland.
It'll keep even adults fascinated.
After the news, our audience in Carlisle will be putting questions on the issues of the week to Tony Benn, former Labour Minister, 50 years in the House of Commons, Claire Rayner, writer, agony aunt, former nurse, David Heathcote-Amery, Tory Shadow Trade and Industry spokesman, and John McCurrick, racing tipster, lover of the turf. That's question time, 35 minutes from now on BBC One, after the news.
This is BBC One Scotland. Now the news with Michael Burke and David Robertson. It's 10 o'clock.
Body blow for Britain's steel industry. 6,000 jobs are to go. The global forces that are closing efficient factories with productive workers. Consequences for one family. Their son's job went this morning, the father's could tonight. Colonel Gaddafi says he can prove the Lockerbie bomber was innocent. And a miracle of life after the Indian earthquake.
And here in Scotland, no more Lockerbie prosecutions yet. There just isn't enough evidence to convict, claims the Lord Advocate. And one of the Scottish music hall greats, Jack Milroy, has died.
Good evening. 6,000 steelworkers are to lose their jobs across the country. It's the biggest blow the industry has had in a decade. Half of those jobs will be lost in Wales. Chorus, once British Steel, is blaming a drop in demand and the strength of the pound. The unions have called it a stab in the back, and tonight Tony Blair called on the company to think again. The cuts will fall across the United Kingdom. Mills at Redcar, Shotton and Bringwyn are all closing. The site at Ebbw Vale is to be shut down. That's 800 job losses in an area with one of the highest rates of unemployment in Britain. And after 40 years, steel making is to end at the giant Llanwen plant near Newport. Stephen Evans is there and has sent this report.
This town lives and literally breathes steel. The Llanwen works dominates the area, 2 miles long, belching steam. People live in its shadow. They can see it. They can smell it even. Here and in the sister plant at Ebbw Vale, there's dismay tonight.
I've been working here since 1962, and the feeling inside the works is absolutely terrible, because we're all going to lose our jobs.
and we're feeling now that we're being let down by the company.
Just done a 12-hour night shift. They called us in to tell us we've lost 2 jobs from July.
My family been down there for over 100 years now. My grandfather worked down there, my father worked down there. It's a very sad time.
Chorus is losing £10 million a week. British productivity is high, but not high enough to offset the fall of the euro and shrinking demand, all meaning too many steelworks, too many steel workers.
There's no doubt there is a lot of anger on the ground. Many of the people in there feel they've done their best, but now they're the victims of forces beyond their control. That anger is directed against Chorus, but some of it is directed at the government.
So Labour politicians are wary. Steel areas like Llanwern are Labour areas. The government is voicing dismay.
It's really a devastating blow for what is an immensely skilled, productive workforce and their families. We will do everything we can to turn the situation round, and I hope even at this late stage that the company will be prepared to sit down and talk with us so that we can find a better way forward.
Chorus kept its cards glued to its chest. It says for the best of reasons.
We didn't want, as has happened in the past when government have been informed about plans by employers, for them to be leaks into the media and into the press, and the people concerned heard about the situation through the media and through the press rather than from the management concerned in the business.
That's an application form.
There have been tears in the Walkley home tonight. Jane Walkley loses her job tomorrow. Gerald works nights tonight at Llanwern, where he finds out his fate. Their son Christian learnt he'll lose his job at Llanwern today.
I kept saying to my son that he was safe in the coal mill. I don't know what to say to him. And at the end of the day, he's only 24.
We might have to sell the house and go down other avenues that way and look for a cheaper mortgage, probably.
Bye then.
Gerald Walkley left for a long night shift in Llanwern tonight. Whatever the politics and the economics, there's also emotion and human pain. Stephen Evans, BBC News, Llanwern.
Chorus blamed today's job losses on the high level of the pound and a weak market for steel. After 2 years of increasingly heavy losses, analysts say the company had to reduce capacity in order to survive. Our business correspondent Rory Kethlin-Jones reports on why Chorus cut jobs so drastically.
Just a few years ago, it was seen as a model of modern steelmaking. Now Llanwern is the major casualty as Chorus tries to stem its losses. With demand falling at home, the plant had to export into a fiercely competitive market. Steel from the company's Dutch plants was £15 a tonne cheaper because of the weak euro. And with Russian plants desperate to export too, prices have been forced down in a world where there's simply too much steel.
Well, there is global overcapacity. The steel industry is still going through a period of restructuring that is a requirement, a residue of the days of nationalisation when it was structured on uneconomic lines.
It's currency movements which have caused the real damage. Over 5 years, the pound rose from 2 marks 40 to 3 marks 15. Over the same period, a profit of over £1 billion from steelmaking in Britain has turned into a loss of over £300 million. In such a climate, Britain has not been seen as the place to invest in steel.
The difficulty is that we've had such a very long period of sterling overvaluation that it's become difficult to justify further investment in the UK where companies have been running up losses.
There have been desertions amongst British customers like the car industry. Nissan, which presently gets much of its steel from South Wales, said today that supplies for the new Micra would have to be priced in euros, and that might mean importing from the continent. In any case, a changing economy is cutting demand.
We've seen a change in manufacturing industry in the UK from the traditional heavy industries like shipbuilding and so on, and towards more light industry, electronics, telecommunications industries, pharmaceuticals and so on. So the demand for steel from our own manufacturing base is reduced.
Shares in Chorus rose sharply following today's announcement as investors decided that the company was at last tackling its problems. But tonight, a British workforce which has seen its numbers dwindle by 90% over 30 years knows that the pain may not be over. Without new investment, British steelmaking may continue to fade away. Rory Kethlin-Jones, BBC News.
The Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, says he'll produce new evidence to prove that the man convicted yesterday of the Lockerbie bombing is innocent. And here, some relatives of the Lockerbie victims said they also doubt that Abdel Bassat al-Magrahi carried out the atrocity and are calling for a public inquiry. A second Libyan, who was acquitted yesterday in the Netherlands, has been given a hero's welcome back home in Tripoli. From there, James Robbins reports.
Chaos and celebration at Tripoli airport. The man cleared by the Scottish judges emerged to a triumphant welcome. God is great, shouted Al-Amin Fahima as he was engulfed by dozens of relatives, Libyan officials and the international media. This homecoming was staged for maximum impact, with a cavalcade of cars to a second welcome. But nothing had prepared us for what was to happen next. Colonel Gaddafi, the Libyan leader, embraced the man found not guilty by the Scottish judges before he launched into an extraordinary attack on those very same judges. The colonel coupled it with a claim that he will reveal next Monday evidence showing the convicted murderer al-Magrahi is in fact innocent.
I
will speak on Monday, Colonel Gaddafi said, but when I speak, the judges will have three choices: resign, tell the truth, or commit suicide. This was a political verdict, he said, contrary to law, because al-Magrahi is as innocent as al-Fahima, at which al-Fahima said, and I'm a witness. Colonel Gaddafi's bizarre intervention may give comfort to al-Magrahi's family. The mother of the convicted Lockerbie bomber apparently collapsed yesterday when she heard of his life sentence. In Britain, too, some of the relatives of the victims say they have doubts about the trial and its outcome. They're demanding a public inquiry to reveal more. Some openly challenged the guilt of al-Magrahi. Others, including Jim Swire, said they were not challenging the verdict, only the evidence. Jim Swire displayed a timing device, implying that Palestinians linked to Syria were behind the bombing, for which only al-Magrahi has been convicted.
After so many years, we feel really the time has come where people shouldn't mess us around anymore. It's high time we had some answers to those questions that lie outside what this trial was all about, which was the guilt or innocence of two men.
But here in Libya, Colonel Gaddafi's intervention is quite different in character and quite breathtaking. His reputation around the world as a credible witness is hardly high, and any new evidence he may produce was certainly never offered to the trial judges. Strangest of all, perhaps, Colonel Gaddafi, who dragged this country to isolation, now seems to be undermining his own efforts to win respectability and rehabilitate Libya. James Robbins, BBC News, Tripoli.
Here, 5 men have been arrested on suspicion of running a bomb factory in West London. Police raided a house in Ealing earlier today, seizing equipment they believe could have been used to make pipe bombs. The detectives have ruled out any connection with Irish terrorism or with animal rights campaigners.
The 5 Irish men were arrested in an early morning raid. Members of the anti-terrorist branch and armed police entered this house in what has been described as a carefully organised operation. No shots were fired and there were no injuries.
We also found a number of items which are being examined, and we believe as a result of this careful operation we have prevented a potential pipe bomb attack.
Pipe bombs have been used regularly in Northern Ireland by terrorist groups. They're crude, homemade anti-personnel devices, and if they're packed with nails and glass, they can injure and kill. The men arrested today are being held at this police station in West London. There was another operation in Southend, but no arrests were made. Scotland Yard stressed there was no evidence to link the suspects to Irish terrorist groups or animal rights extremists who've been sending letter bombs to British shops and businesses. Detectives are now working on the theory that criminal gangs had planned to use the pipe bombs in London, a worrying escalation in the use of weaponry by the underworld. Stephen Cape, BBC News.
Nearly a week after the Indian earthquake, a young girl was pulled alive from the debris today. But the situation for the survivors is growing increasingly desperate. Here, more than a dozen charities, including the Red Cross and Christian Aid, have joined together to launch a disaster relief appeal. So far today, £1.5 million has been raised. Relief supplies continue to arrive in India, but there are growing concerns about disease and malnutrition. Special correspondent Ben Brown reports from Bouge.
Tonight, the Mohammed family are struggling to keep warm in bitterly cold temperatures. This time last week, they were in their own beds, in their own home. Then the earthquake struck and destroyed everything they had. Not a scrap of aid has reached them yet. We need food, clothes, blankets and tents, says Ghulam Sadiq Mohammed, and help to rebuild our house. By day, the homeless queue patiently for whatever aid anyone will give them, even if it's just a bag of water. Indian bureaucracies made it hard to get help to remote villages. Bad roads and bad transport have added to the logistical nightmare. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless by this massive earthquake. They're hungry and they're thirsty. International aid is beginning to trickle through to them, but not enough and not nearly fast enough. Here in the city of Bouge, there is hope one minute, despair the next. These Israeli rescuers were working to free a mother and her baby. When they got to them, both had already died. Yet more bodies were pulled from the rubble today to add to the long lines of the dead. Death is everywhere in Bouge, the sight of it and the stench of it. Desperately, the authorities are trying to stop the spread of disease. They're worried about cholera, typhoid, and rescue teams are inoculated as they work. But just when you think no one else can come out alive, someone does. A man in his 30s plucked out from the ruins he thought had become his tomb. They gave him a blast of oxygen to help him breathe. You can call it a miracle, you can call it good luck. Whatever it is, it's boosted the morale of the rescue teams who saved him.
It's the reason we come here, and now we are going to work and try to find somebody else, because it shows that it's possible to live 7 or even more days.
And more proof of that came with the dramatic rescue of a little girl called Priyanka. As she realized they had brought her back from the dead, a dazed look gave way to a beaming smile. Priyanka had endured a week in which she thought she'd been buried alive. It is a week that will haunt her forever. Extraordinary stories of survival abound, none more so than that of this baby. She's just been born more than 2 months premature. Her mother had been badly injured in the disaster, but still managed to give birth to her. Truly a child of the earthquake. Ben Brown, BBC News, Bouge.
A court in India has ordered the Hinduja brothers to remain in the country while their part in a bribery scandal is investigated. Srichand and Gopichand Hinduja were at the centre of the row which led to Peter Mandelson's resignation here last week as Northern Ireland Secretary. They're being questioned about the sale of guns to the Indian government. The Ulster Unionist leader David Trimble says time's running out to break the impasse in the Northern Ireland peace process. Speaking after meeting Tony Blair at Westminster, Mr Trimble blamed Sinn Féin for the lack of progress on the key issues of police reform and the handover of IRA weapons. The French government is being urged to reopen police checkpoints at the ports of Caen and Dieppe. Both are being used increasingly by illegal immigrants trying to enter Britain. Tight controls at Calais have forced migrants to try the smaller French Channel ports. The port of Caen has seen over 100 arrests this month, and from there, John Sopel reports.
2 more illegal immigrants picked up by the police at the ferry port of Ouistreham, just outside Caen. In January alone, there have been nearly as many arrests at this once sleepy port as there were in the whole of last year. In the town itself, we met a group of Kosovar Albanians, acutely camera-shy and with all their worldly possessions in just a few carrier bags. Determined to get to Britain, they've already been caught once trying to get into the country and have been turned back.
They turned me back, what?
They turned you back?
Yes.
When?
3 days ago.
In England?
Yes.
What, they found you on a lorry?
Yes, in the port.
So what do you do now?
I'll try again.
And it could soon become a whole lot easier, because it's been announced that the police border post here in Caen will be closed down in the summer, along with the one at Dieppe. The local police union are incredulous at the decision.
Unfortunately, it will be a catastrophe if they close this post in June, because it is absolutely certain that more illegal immigrants will find their way to Britain.
These tough and highly successful checks, introduced in Calais 6 weeks ago, have had an extraordinary knock-on effect. Illegal immigrants are now fanning out along the coast to chance their arm at other ports like Caen, where they hope security might not be so tight.
Last year, 140 illegal immigrants have been arrested in the port of Ouistreham. This year, in January, we did have 100 arrested. But we are checking all the vehicles before they're boarding on our ships, inside, outside, and underneath. And what else can we do?
A problem once confined to Calais is now spreading to the rest of France's cross-channel ports. And although the ferry companies are redoubling their efforts to crack down on illegal immigrants, the decision of the French police to close certain frontier posts will be regarded as incomprehensible by the British and perhaps as a green light by the illegal immigrants. John Sopel, BBC News, Caen.
Teachers in England and Wales will find out tomorrow morning what their pay increase will be for the coming year. Many schools are facing big problems recruiting and keeping staff, and teaching unions are threatening industrial action. Our education correspondent Mike Baker joins me from outside the Department for Education. OK, Mike, what are the teachers going to get tomorrow?
Well, the announcement expected from here in the morning is a 3.7% pay rise across the board, so above inflation. But on top of that, starting salaries for teachers will go up by more, something over 5%, and there'll be a 30% increase in the living allowances paid to teachers in London and the South East. And perhaps most important, there'll be new discretion for head teachers who are struggling to recruit to pay a sort of bonus, a golden hello or a golden handcuff, to make sure they keep teachers or get new teachers into the classroom.
What's your judgment, Mike? Do you think this is enough to help recruitment, help retention of teachers?
One can't see it making a big difference in the short term, and that's significant because teacher shortages have the potential to be a real embarrassment in a general election. The problem is it takes over a year to recruit a graduate and train them and get them into the classroom. And the other problem is that the real shortages are in the high housing cost areas, not just London and the South East, but places like Bristol or parts of the Midlands. And frankly, a few £1,000s there is not going to make enough difference to recruit teachers in from elsewhere. Teacher unions won't be that happy with it, and they'll look with envy to the 21.5% over 3 years that Scottish teachers have received.
Mike Baker, thanks very much. A coroner has called for urgent action to stop anti-cancer drugs being wrongly injected into the spine. She was speaking at the inquest into the death of Donna Horn, a 23-year-old who was paralysed after being injected in the spine with a leukemia drug. A similar error has left a 19-year-old man critically ill in a Nottingham hospital.
Today, for the first time, Donna Horn's family finally found out who was behind this appalling medical blunder. The doctor, who's now a consultant, avoided the cameras but apologised. He told the inquest that though he knew the drug was potentially lethal if given incorrectly, he'd suffered a lapse in concentration. Donna was just 15 when the drug was wrongly administered. It left her paralysed and after 8 years finally killed her. Her family today welcome calls for more safety measures.
The coroner has proposed certain changes while administering cancer drugs and recommends that this should be implemented as soon as possible. The family are in total agreement with this.
Leicestershire Health Authority paid out compensation after the error, and behalf of the hospital gave an assurance that these tragic events had not been repeated. Safeguards, they said, were now in place. A drug similar to this one featured in today's case. Safety warnings make it clear that it must only be given intravenously. But confusingly, it's often used alongside another drug, which does go into the spine. Donna's accident involved a similar mix-up. Some 50 miles from Donna's family home, there's another victim, now fighting for his life after a similar error. His parents, they say, must be devastated.
They're not aware of what they're going to go through, like we did. Yes, and it does break your heart to hear it happening to other people.
The need for alternative syringes, which won't work if attached to spinal needles, were among the recommendations made by the coroner today. Other hospitals, like Great Ormond Street, have come up with their own measures, prompted by similar tragedies.
The drugs that go in the spine and the drug that goes in the vein should never be in the same place together, and so we prevent that from happening. We make it impossible for the error to occur.
In the past 15 years, there have been at least 13 similar blunders. It may not sound many, but this is a totally preventable mistake. It's now hoped that the very specific recommendations made at today's inquest will eradicate such errors altogether. Karen Allen, BBC News, Kettering.
The mother of Anna Clombier, the 8-year-old African girl murdered by her great-aunt and her boyfriend in a North London flat, says she's appalled that the British authorities failed to prevent her death. Marie-Thérèse Couot and Carl Manning were found guilty last month of torturing Anna with belts and hammers and forcing her to sleep in a bin liner. She died of malnutrition. Anna had been sent to London to escape the poverty of her home in Abidjan in the Ivory Coast. Alan Little's been to visit her home there to speak to her mother.
This is what Anna was born to, a fly-blown, sweltering alleyway on the margins of Abidjan's sprawling squalor. Life here is a constant battle to hold back the tide of African poverty. Little wonder her parents dreamed of lifting their children beyond this hopeless inheritance to something unimaginably better. Anna's mother showed me the photo album that is all she has left of her daughter. On the front page, a photograph of Anna with her aunt, Marie-Thérèse, the woman who took her to England full of promise and then abused and murdered her there.
J'avais confiance en elle. Parce que quelqu'un qui ne t'a jamais fait, moi.
I trusted her. She was someone who'd never done me any harm. In European countries, children progress very fast, so I liked what she said. She said, "Don't worry, your child will be fine." I had no reason to doubt it.
Je pleure dans mon cœur. Mais vraiment, c'est Dieu seul qui peut me essuyer mes larmes.
I'm crying in my heart, and it's only God who can wipe my tears away. I'm crying in my heart.
This is the schooling Anna left behind. The extraordinary dedication of the teachers is its one outstanding asset. But the children here lack much. Books, writing materials, opportunity. They lack everything, in fact, but an unquenchable enthusiasm for learning.
When I heard what happened, I was shocked. She was a bright girl, always well behaved in class and good at her lessons. When I heard the news, I felt sick in my heart.
Anna left the protection and love of this, her own community, to be subjected to months of abuse. Britain had represented the hope of a life unachievable here. Anna's parents say they wonder what kind of country Britain is that so failed to protect their child.
They say 3 times she went to hospital. They could have saved her those 3 times, but they didn't save her. They left her until she died.
Anna escaped the poverty of her African home, and in doing so she lost the love and protection that survives there despite it. All the wealth and opportunity of her new home did not save her. For her family, the irony is mystifying and heartbreaking. Alan Little, BBC News, Ivory Coast.
It's now 10:25. I'll be back a little later with an update on the day's headlines, but now we join our news teams across the UK.
Good evening. The Lord Advocate has ruled out further prosecutions at this stage over the Lockerbie bombing. Colin Boyd told MSPs the evidence wasn't available. Yesterday, Abdel Basit Ali Mohamed Al-Megrahi was found guilty of the biggest mass murder in British history, the downing of Pan Am Flight 103, with the loss of 270 lives.
Back home to Libya, punching the air in triumph, Alamin Khalifa Fahima cleared of involvement in the Lockerbie bombing. Jubilant supporters chanted, "Justice has triumphed and down with America." Meanwhile, Abdel Basit Ali Mohamed Al-Megrahi considers whether to appeal against his conviction and 20-year minimum sentence. Today's scenes in Tripoli confirm that the international community will find it difficult to persuade Libya to admit wider guilt. Indeed, the Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi claimed Al-Megrahi was innocent and said he would produce proof on Monday. Back in London, Dr. Jim Swire, whose daughter Flora died in the atrocity. He welcomed the verdict while continuing to pose technical questions over the timer device used to bring down Pan Am Flight 103. But he said the bigger question for victims' families was who ordered the bombing.
For many of us, it would help to know the identity and motives of those who ordered the murder of our loved ones, how they did it, and why they were not prevented from doing so. Yesterday we learnt, subject to any appeal, the identity of one of those men, thanks to the fairest criminal trial that we could have hoped to have seen.
In the Scottish Parliament, the Lord Advocate also spoke proudly of Scottish justice, but he freely acknowledged that Al-Megrahi had not operated on his own.
The terms of Megrahi's conviction make it clear that he did not act alone. He has been convicted of committing murder while acting along with others and in furtherance of the purposes of the Libyan intelligence services.
But successful prosecutions needed hard evidence, and that simply wasn't available.
We will, of course, look carefully at the evidence and the judgment of the court, but my judgment at present is that there is insufficient evidence to justify further proceedings at this time.
Pressed by MSPs, the Lord Advocate seemed cool about any further public inquiry. Plainly, there is more contention to come, but MSPs all agreed that Lockerbie itself should be permitted to revert to quiet anonymity. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
There may be no plans to prosecute anyone else, but the Lockerbie bomber will almost certainly attempt to win the right to appeal. Al-Megrahi has 14 days to instruct his legal team to apply. It would entail 5 judges who played no part in the Lockerbie trial going to Camp Zeist.
Bill Taylor, who defended the Lockerbie bomber, will already be combing every word written by the judges, searching for any incorrect detail or error of judgment. But how likely is it after such a rigorous trial with such senior legal figures at the helm that he'll find even the smallest crumb of comfort from the defence point of view?
I would think it's rather unlikely, given that we have 3 of Scotland's top judges who will have been responsible for producing that document. In the normal trial, of course, you've got one judge who's addressing his charge to the jury, and that's usually where the defence will focus their attention, looking for some sort of misdirection. But where you've got 3 judges, it's unlikely that they'll have made any mistake.
Like the trial, it will fall to Lord Justice General Lord Roger to select who'll take the case. There is no automatic right to appeal, so further argument for the bomber's defence team does lie ahead. The first stage for Megrahi is to instruct his counsel, Bill Taylor, he wants to appeal. This must happen in 14 days. Next would be the defence arguing there are good grounds. A single judge would hear the case at that stage, and if he or she said yes, 5 senior judges, who must have had no involvement in the trial, will take over. The focus now is on who'll make up those 5. Lord Cullen, flanked here by Lockerbie Judge Lord Sutherland, could be in line, though as the chairman of the Paddington Rail Disaster Inquiry, his findings would have to have been completed by then. Alan Mackay reporting, Scotland.
Growing numbers of GPs across Scotland want changes in the law to enable them to deliver vaccines in single doses due to parents' concerns over the MMR vaccine. 2 weeks ago, the Medical Research Council concluded there was no connection between the measles, mumps and rubella jab and autism. But some doctors appear reluctant to continue using the triple vaccine and are importing individual vaccines from abroad. Jack Milroy, one of the greats of Scottish music hall, has died. In a career spanning more than 50 years, Jack Milroy performed on television and on the stage. But he'll be best remembered for the comedy double act Francie and Josie, which he performed with Ricky Fulton in 1960. Mr. Milroy died in Glasgow's Western Infirmary this morning. He's survived by his wife, Mary Lee.
Jack Milroy may have started out on stage, but in a career that spanned more than 50 years, he did everything.
He came from that generation of music hall performers, and yet he was one of the very few performers who managed to make the transition into television, and that really was thanks to Francie and Josie.
Francie and Josie began in 1960 when Jack teamed up with Ricky Fulton. The comedy duo lasted 30 years and was loved by millions.
Josie, it's not about work I dream. I dream every night of eating food. For instance, all last night I dreamt of eating spaghetti. Spaghetti all night long. I woke this morning, what? Naked cord in my pyjama trousers.
It took off like a bomb and beat all the big shows that were coming from London. So we were amazed ourselves, but there it is. It's 32 years of fantastic success. It's never been done before, 2 comics getting it together and no even arguing.
Jack never retired and was supposed to be at Glasgow's Pavilion Theatre today for the launch of a new charity show. Pauline McLean, reporting Scotland.
Jack Milroy, who died today. Rugby now, Kenny Logan will become only the 13th player to win 50 caps for Scotland. The Scots play France in their opening Six Nations Championship game on Sunday. The team for Paris is captained by scrum half Andy Nicol. Glasgow's Gordon Bullock is named as hooker after Steve Brotherson withdrew with a knee injury.
Matty Stewart also comes into the front here to replace George Graham. Back to Michael Burke now in London.
And the main news again tonight. Tony Blair has called on the steelmaker Chorus to rethink its decision to cut 6,000 jobs. He said today's announcement was a devastating blow to the workforce. 1,300 jobs will go at Llanwern near Newport, and nearly 800 with the closure of the Ebu Vale plant. And the Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, says he revealed new evidence which proves that the man convicted of the Lockerbie bombing is innocent. Newsnight starting now over on BBC Two, but from the BBC 10 o'clock news, good night.
If you'd like to give to the Disasters Emergency Committee India Earthquake Appeal, which was launched today, you can call 0870 60 60 900 or make a donation online or at any bank or post office.
Good evening to you. Some interesting weather over the weekend, to say the least. At the moment, it's all changed. That weather front is moving in from the Atlantic. It's introducing not only a band of cloud and some outbreaks of rain and in places sleet, but it's also introducing somewhat milder weather. And here it is. It's giving rain at the moment across much of England, Wales and eastern Scotland. That band of rain, or perhaps a little bit of sleet or wet snow, will continue to move eastwards during the rest of the night. Then it's going to grind to a halt close to eastern counties, still affecting the northeast of Scotland. Another weather system following later on tomorrow to herald an unsettled weekend. Now, we've just about had a touch of frost in East Anglia, but those temperatures are rising now, the clouds thickening, the rain's not far away from the east, and it's going to continue in many places throughout the night. But clearer weather will follow into the west, and as I said a while ago, those temperatures should rise. Tomorrow, the central and eastern part starts off cloudy, some rain here and there too, a lot of it dying away as the day wears on, a little bit of brightness easing across from the west. The northeast of Scotland, though, I think is going to hold on to some outbreaks of rain for much of the time, and it's going to be quite late, I think, before it finally dries up in East Anglia and Kent. As for temperatures tomorrow, a little bit higher, creeping up back to around normal for the time of year, 6 or 7 degrees or so. Now, the fun and games start over the weekend. We're going to have areas of low pressure moving across the country. In the south, they're going to bring wet and windy weather, but this one here is the interesting one as it heads up towards Scotland. It is going to be responsible for pulling in some very cold air, very cold winds indeed, across those northern hours. You see the blue arrows there. Temperatures as a result probably around freezing, but that's only half the story, because it does, I think, mean we're going to get a fair bit of snow in those northern parts of Scotland, particularly Shetland, but there may even be some in Auckland too, and that means to say blizzard conditions in those areas over the weekend. Further south, it's an unsettled picture for most places. In fact, for England and Wales, we're going to have belts of rain moving across during the course of Saturday. Eventually, there'll be somewhat brighter weather following along behind, but in that brighter weather, we'll find some showers. And we've already looked at the north of Scotland, where it's going to be particularly unsettled. Heading into Sunday, some more rain coming across the south of the country, somewhat brighter further north, again a mixture of sunshine and showers. And then when we head into Monday, it may well get a little bit brighter in many places, but only for a time before we find more rain coming in from the west. But at least apart from Shetland, it should be a mild weekend. That's it. Have a nice one.
The BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra in China, 2 years planning.
I would say for the orchestra, for the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, this has been a coup.
4 major cities.
This is truly an amazing situation to be in.
From Shanghai's brave performance of Copland's A Lincoln Portrait,
just want to get on and do it,
to Beijing, where an expectant audience await. The SSO takes centre stage in a special edition of XS, Sunday at 9:45, BBC 2 Scotland.
Tomorrow night on the Kirsty Walk Show. From Victor and Barry to Broadway and Hollywood, Scottish actor Alan Cumming talks to me about pills, thrills and bellyaches.
I realised recently that I think acting is quite easy.
And dedicated follower of fashion Dougie Vipond struts his stuff on the catwalks of Florence.
We have to try and make these look as sexy as possible. So it's really important to know that you bring them to life, you use the pockets.
That's the Kirsty Walk Show, tomorrow night, 9:30, BBC 1 Scotland.
On BBC 1 Scotland now, Question Time.
Tonight on Question Time, Tony Benn, former Cabinet Minister, Labour MP for over 50 years, standing down at the next election. Shadow Trade and Industry Secretary David Heathcote-Amery. Claire Rayner, prolific author, agony aunt and president of the Patients Association. And betting tipster and pundit of the turf, John McCririck.